And there we go. So we should be fine. We should now be live in the Hearth Space group. So hello to everybody in the Hearth Space. I am here with the fabulous Katie Gerrard, who I have, well, our paths have crossed through the years, haven't they? You know, I remember, you know, being a little mini witchlet and meeting you for the first time and coming to then your Northern Tradition work. And I think it was, I want to say it was Treadwell's, where I came to do a Seidr rite with you many years ago, which was amazing. And then I came and did some training with you in seership, which was also fabulous. And I know that so many people in my community love your books. So I'm so excited to be here to welcome the fabulous Katie Gerrard, who is going to be talking to us about, I'm going to be asking you questions about your books and about your pathway into the Northern Tradition. And for those of you who are joining us live in the Hearth Space, if you want to post any questions that you have for Katie as we are going through, please do so. So yes, I've done my introduction to you, Katie. Would you like to say hello to the group and maybe do a little bit of introduction about yourself? I know I've shared your bio already, but for those people who haven't read it, that would be lovely.
Yeah, so I'm Katie Gerrard, as Maggie said, and basically my work at the moment is more around sort of I guess my work right now is I'm a registered hypnotherapist, so I work as a hypnotherapist, and I've started running courses. So we did a Seidr training course online this month, which is just finished, or last month, should I say. I am sort of probably more well known for Seidr than anything else, but more recently I have been working with ancestors. I'm been doing a lot of work within psychology at the moment. So part of my work recently has been looking at witchcraft as a practice and looking at sort of almost kind of a Michael Hana core shamanism, but for core witchcraft. So looking at what is witchcraft, what does it mean, what happens in our brain when we do it, what happens when we do magic and spellcraft, what's going on when we're doing divination. So it's quite a big piece of work. So I don't know if it'll ever kind of become anything that is you know, ready to show people. But I have been, you know, Wiccan for many, many years, but I tend to count myself now more as a standard, you know, witch or a core witch, intuitive witch. My work is all inclusive, so which less and less unfortunately seems to be at the moment. So I'm very proud to make sure that everything I do is as inclusive as possible. Obviously we can't get everything right all the time, but my plan is that I'm as inclusive as I can be.
I know sometimes when I talk with people who have that sort of deep desire to move us forward as a society to be more inclusive, it's something that we talk about in the Hearth Space, what we can learn from our ancestors about that maybe, you know, our gender polarity is perhaps a bit stronger than it used to be, is that our hearts are maybe a little bit further ahead than our heads, and our heads are trying to catch up with things like language and structures and stuff, and we do our best, but we don't always get it right. So I know that will resonate with a lot of people in the community. And this idea of going really deep into what is, you know, what is magic, what is witchcraft, what is actually happening. It's like so important. I sometimes think that it's just that we don't know how to name that skill set in society. It's like just because we don't have words to describe it doesn't mean that it's not there. No, it's definitely one of my missions in the world is to help people to cross that bridge between the two and say, actually, you know, it's a naming challenge, not a reality challenge. So exciting.
Yeah, and I think the key thing that I've sort of realized over, you know, the last 5 years really has been that you know, a lot of our traditions are based on things like, you know, external things. So, you know, you'll have the Norse tradition is very based on working with the Norse gods. You know, the Druid tradition, you're working with nature spirits. Within Wicca, you've got that god, goddess. So when you strip it all back, you realize that actually you can be any kind of witch. So, you know, any religion, any belief system you can put into witchcraft. What makes you a witch isn't who you were initiated by or how you practice or what you do. It's in your heart. And there are, you know, there are ways that you can, you know, train people to be a witch. You can work with beginners witchcraft, which doesn't have to have everything really sort of, you know, put into a set thing. You don't have to be, you have to work with this and you have to work with that. You can use elements, you can use ancestors, nature spirits, deities, or you can use plants. You don't have to use anything at all. So it's about really kind of stripping it back and going, how do we make this workable? How do we make this something that is really accessible for anybody?
And that will be a good thing. That would definitely be a good thing, wouldn't it? That yeah, sometimes the mystery becomes inaccessibility. You know, you have to be special. Or, this is valid and that's not valid. So I really like that, and the more that we can do that, the better. And I can see more people joining us in the live as we go as well. So hello to all of you as you are joining. I am speaking here with the lovely Katie Gerrard, and we've just been talking about not labeling stuff or, you know, like getting stuck in a box. But I do have a question for you, which whatever answer you give us, we're going to take that as the definitive answer because you are Katie Gerrard. How do you pronounce save or seed, as some people call it? How would you pronounce it?
So I would say definitely don't take me as a definitive answer. So most people, so across the world, pronounce it as safe. So you've got the D is a eth, I think it is. So it is the eth, so it's Seidr. The reason I pronounce it the way I do is terrible because basically when I first started getting interested in Seath, nobody really knew about it. It was, you know, really just not known. And I read this sort of one line in a book and decided it was what I wanted to do. And my friend who I was working with at the time, we did a lot of magical work together. He was studying Anglo-Saxon. So he took the word to his Anglo-Saxon tutor and said, what is how do you pronounce this? So his Anglo-Saxon tutor said it's Seidr, or Seath. And then, you know, there were, I think Diana Paxson talks about seething and boiling. So I sort of, okay, it must be Seath. And then that's what I've called it forever. So I have tried to change how I pronounce it, but I sort of never quite got there.
You know, you make me feel so much better because my experience was exactly the same. And I think I read Diana Paxson as well, and also Jan Fries. And he talks about the sort of the boiling and the bubbling energy coming up, and I always feel this like Feyú energy rising, like the serpent energy coming up. So it always made sense to me that it would be seething. And what I find really interesting is that whenever I talk about it, because when I'm about to do it with a group, we always talk about seething. But if we're talking about it as a theoretical or soothe. So you've made me feel much better. And I think that we can all definitively agree that if there are two ways that you pronounce it, then we can all pronounce it the way that it works for us, and it's fine. No.
Yeah.
I know it's something that people always ask me. So I was like, we shall ask Katie. Now, the Hearth Space is it's a Northern tradition group in the sense that it is there to explore the mysteries and the spirituality and to sort of take a deep dive into it, rather than necessarily it's not a heathen group. Some of our members are, but it's not, there's no, let's say, like religious or labeling that goes with it. So, the idea of, we talk a lot about eclectic practice. We have a lot of people who practice across pantheons and across traditions, and they're going, oh, the runes feel like this. Or, last time I did live with Amanda Narin, we were talking about the runes in the body and the chakras, and we were sort of going, I get very much on my high horse then. I go, they're not the same, as everyone knows. But equally, it's really interesting to sing the runes into the energy centers in the body and look at what they're looking like. So we are very eclectic, but we obviously are going to have a bit of a focus on the Northern tradition. So my first question for you, and I think you've mentioned that I read a sentence in a book and I just knew I was going to do it. Was that your first encounter with the Northern tradition, or did you know a bit about it before then?
So basically, I was, as a teenager, I was always quite interested in, mind, body, spirit stuff and spirituality and things like that. So I'd read a couple of books on witchcraft, and then I went to university, and I was really lucky because the university I went to had a pagan society. So I was able to really kind of throw myself into learning lots more about paganism and the gods and things. And one of the people I met there was really into the Northern tradition. They were from Scandinavia, so that made sense. And I sort of started getting interested in the runes through getting to know them. But so I grew up in Essex. So Essex has, it is very kind of, the land is very Saxon, the words around the Saxon. So I started exploring that energy, but there isn't that much really available for there. So it was a interesting, the simple step to go on to working then with the Norse. And things were very gendered in the 90s. There was a lot of, if you're male, you do this, if you're female, you do this. And Seidr was really kind of, shown as the female version of Galdra, or, as though you can't do a stumble if you have boobs or something. It's like, we're so lucky now that things are much less, but back in the 90s you would literally have, you're going to do a men's mysteries and you're going to do a women's mysteries, and you couldn't mix. You couldn't go, well, actually I feel quite male today, because you'd be told to get lost. So it makes sense then that the Northern tradition was a bit gendered as well. But that was my first interest in that. And I found Freya as a deity, and have basically worked with her ever since.
I know there are a lot of people who love Freya and work with her as a patroness. She's even though she is in many ways a very feminine deity, the fact that she crosses over into the sphere of war as well, and that she's this sort of adventuress. And I love the fact that she's there, she's coming out of Vanaheim and then placing her standard. This is what I stand for in Asgard, and a lot of the Northern deities do offer us, when we go that bit deeper, a more like gender fluid possibility, don't we? We've got Loki, we've got Odin, and we've been talking about this quite a lot. So it's really really relevant at the moment. I know Lisa shared a fabulous picture of Loki as this sort of sensual, androgynous being of just deliciousness. So but you're right, the 90s were very much, I remember being in groups where it's like, here are the women's mysteries over here and the men's mysteries over there, and all of the women sort of going, the men need to pull their socks up a bit here, really, because we're doing a lot more women's mysteries than they were ever doing. Or maybe they just kept it very quiet, who knows. So that's your discovery. And in many ways, it's quite unusual. People share when they join the half space, and they'll say, how did you discover the Northern tradition? And for a lot of people, it was through books, because there weren't the teachers out there or the pagan societies at their university. They were doing their best to find the mysteries of the runes. It's one of the reasons why I set up this group, was because I was like, you couldn't I spent years, reading all of these books and then experimenting and going, well, that doesn't quite feel right, and then grafting what I had learned from being taught as a Wiccan, as a shaman, all of these other things into my Northern tradition practice to try and find the lifeblood inside it. And I always feel that when we meet teachers, it's like a moment of magic in itself, because they're few and far between. So it's obviously meant to be that you were going to find the pagan society at that particular university and find the person who could support that a little bit.
Definitely. And I think it taught me so much about ritual, because whereas, normally when you start off, you're basically standing there with your books and things, or, you may join a group, but they'll throw you in slowly. You'll have to do all the pre-initiate stuff first. Whereas at a pagan society, when you're all pretty much at the same level, you have to step up. You have to be, right, well, someone's got to write the ritual. Okay, my turn this month, your turn next month. And we were really lucky to have a space on campus, which was basically an outdoor site that we made to be our ritual site. So we were, right in there with the fire and the smoke and the Welsh nature spirits, and that you can't, what a great apprenticeship, you can't buy that kind of experience. And I've never had that much of a magical life since, really.
It's so true, isn't it? You get older and suddenly you don't have the time to do it, let alone the people around you to do it. And it's one of the reasons the magic of technology now allows people who did work in very close groups when they were younger to still keep in contact with each other, which is so, it's a magical gift, technology, in many ways. Hail Odin. So I've mentioned already that in the hearth space we have a lot of eclectic practitioners, and we have a lot of people who I would describe as being like a spirit guided pathway, not necessarily one that they're picking up as a set structure of follow this ritual, do this, do that, but they're going, oh, this feels right. Oh, Freya came and had a chat with me and she said I should go and do that. So there's a lot of people who would resonate with that. And obviously you've mentioned that you had the Northern tradition and Wicca as well, and that you've woven a lot of other practices in, and that you've come to this place now of sort of the core witch, or an intuitive witch, which I really like. I think people would be really interested though in what the challenges were and how you navigated all those multiple different pathways, how that sort of worked out for you.
Yeah, so I mean, that Sarita, who runs Avalonia Books, once sort of said to me, you can't forget what you already know. So it's whatever you learn always stays with you. So whenever you're building your practice, whenever you're working with people, you can't remove bits of what you've learned. So, this is, I think we were having a conversation about, cultural appropriation, which is something that we all, understand a lot more now than we did like back in the early 2000s. So I'm always very cautious about, okay, how did I learn this? Is it right to move this into this? Is it right to meld and fuse this? But the reality is what we know, and everything that we do, we're basically based on our knowledge. So I mean, I find now working as a hypnotherapist, so much of what I do is basically witchcraft. So much of the path working, so you have a script that you write for somebody when you take them in to hypnosis, and so much of that is really kind of using the same techniques as Jean Williams would have worked within Pagan Pathfinders. But also once you get to kind of the crux of working with somebody's brain, that's all, it feels like pure witchcraft. And many of my clients would be appalled to be thinking that, what we're doing is witchcraft. But actually, if you think about when you work with spellcraft or you go on a shamanic journey, all of these little bits and pieces, the cutting cords, working with elements of yourself, working with personalities, working with the shadow, the inner child. All these things are what we do in witchcraft. So everything we do basically informs the practice that we do. So it's, I never worry about melding and merging things, because I don't pretend or I don't claim to be any one thing. So I don't teach I don't teach Wicca anymore, so I don't have to worry about teaching the practice that I was handed down. When I teach Seidr, it's based on the work that I've done in Seidr. It's not based on this is what is passed down from generations. I can talk about what it says in the sagas, but really it is very much a rebuilt practice based on using what other people have done and what you've done, and borrowing from different areas. So I think as long as you're not claiming that what you're teaching is one particular thing and teaching lots of other stuff, then it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I can really feel that. Sarita Deste, for people who want to look up Sarita, she is a wise woman. I really like that. You're right, you can't forget what you already know. Now, I remember the first ritual that I ever did with Freya and Frey was a Wiccan constructed ritual. And I know for some people that works really well, but I was trying and I was like, all right, I'm going to use the quarter guardians, the dwarves, the Gerrard, all of these things. I called them all in and I said, this feels like the most uncomfortable thing I've ever done. And I know that for some people that structure works really well. And it was what I knew. So I was going to do it, but it was almost that uncomfortableness is what made me go and read, the sagas and the Eddas and look, and see, well, how would I construct a circle that would be different, and look at Freya Aswyn's work and using the runes to create a circle and all of these things. But you have to start somewhere, don't you?
Absolutely.
Got used to grafting on.
And it's what works for you. And I think that's the most important thing. I mean, what we forget is that a lot of the original books that were written on heathenry were written in a way that basically took kind of the Wiccan ritual and made it more heathen. So, you've got a square rather than a circle, and dwarves in the porters and things. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if that's the structure that you feel comfortable with, just use elements, just use whatever works for you. So I've worked less and less Wiccan kind of over the last 5 years, but there are things that I keep, and the things that I keep because they work for me. And I don't feel that I need to make a big song and dance of I am being a heathen today, so I'm doing a heathen ritual, so I don't have any of this. And in the same way, working in a Wiccan circle, I would in the same way be, okay, I don't have to not work with the Norse gods. I don't have to not do runes and things. It's what works for you works for you.
Yeah, well, it very much does so. We've touched on your practical work. We've touched on the fact that you're using some of these things like therapeutically. That actually these are things that I've used all the time, so it's enriching my practice. What we're looking at this month in the Hearth Space is the idea of sacred utterance. We've got our patron Bragi that we're going to be working with, and we're literally just starting to open that. And as we planned that you were going to do this with me and when we were going to do it a while back, and at the time I hadn't realised, we're just going to be opening the month, and then I said, this is so perfect, because you've written two books on Northern tradition work, which I can highly recommend. And when people say, where shall I start, I always recommend your books as the ones to start with, because they are well researched and practical at the same time, which is like magic, literally. And Seidr is the bringing of voice, as alongside energy, to share messages. And as you say with therapists, it reminded me when you're speaking actually of Granny Weatherwax, and when she says headology, that magic is headology, doesn't she? Sort of uses this term. So I wondered if you could share your thoughts on the relationship with sacred words and voice from that perspective of, you know, those three spheres and Northern tradition work. What's your take?
So, I mean, there's a lot of discussion around whether the Norse had drums. So when we work with Seidr, we always have the drums, we have everything going on, and, lots of banging. But there was a lot of discussion about, there just isn't any information really in the sagas that talks about any Seidr rites, or, well, they didn't have Seidr rites as such, but, anything that's called Seidr just hasn't got drums involved at all. And there was lots of discussion, and that's, some people say, well, they didn't have them, they didn't exist in the Norse. And that's completely just not even sensical, because we know that the Sami had drums, we know that the Finnish people had drums, we know that the Norse went all the way to Constantinople and they definitely had drums. So of course they had access to them, and they would have, if they wanted to use drums, they would have been there. And I think that the reason they didn't use drums is because they just didn't need to. So everything that they did with the voice. So if you look at the way, I think that a lot of the work maybe, so, look at the way that Norse people would call in the cattle. I think they would have spoken to the spirits, and they would have called in the spirits in the same way. Think about the way that, when we do a path working, we don't need to use drums. I mean, this is one thing that when I started learning hypnotherapy was like a big surprise to me. I was like, I just don't know how I can do this without drumming people down. Where are the drums? Where are the, and, that my teacher was like, drums are distracting. Why would you use them? What's wrong with you? And I genuinely, right at the beginning, thought that what I would do is take all the work that I'd done, all the learning, and then add some drums to it. But you don't need to. And I think that's I'm a terrible singer. So unfortunately, I can't do Seidr to the best of its ability, because I think the singing people into trance, singing to call up the spirits, I think this is what would have been done. So the voice is so important. And you've got the poetry of the Norse sagas as well. They were written to be in a certain rhythm. And we don't know what the role of that rhythm was, whether the role of the rhythm that they used was simply to sound pretty, or whether when you're talking about things like the Havamal and the Voluspa, whether they were meant to be almost meditative, whether they were designed to make you feel a certain way, or to listen and to really kind of absorb the stories of the ancestors in more of a kind of meditative state. So I think the Norse really knew how to use the voice, and because of that, why would they use drums? Big, bulky, bangy. Just why would you carry it? Because we know, they used the drum to keep the beat when they sailed ships. So yes, they had drums. Of course they had drums. They just didn't need them.
It's a really interesting point there as to whether maybe because there was quite a specific role for the drum in supporting that sort of like practical work and labor, like hard effort. There's an association there with like concentrate that would go against allowing yourself to connect with a space and to connect with the voice and be carried by story. It would be a very different experience. It's certainly, I've been really lucky to work with people in the Seidr rites who, a lot of whom were trained singers. And so it was something that we could experiment with a lot. And that blending of the tone of the voice and the ups and the downs and the softs and the louds, but also, like you say, that sort of punctuation There are hidden rhythms that induce trance, definitely, within the spoken word and within the way in which we can work with the runes as well. And we could never claim to reconstruct, because we just don't know, do we, what it would have been like. But I think that you're right. I think there is something, the magic of the voice and the mastery of the voice, such an important part of the Northern tradition. I want to know more about the cattle. I don't know about the cattle. Tell me about the calling in of the cattle.
Oh, so there's, I mean, this, and this is how we, we do have, it's a living, like the genetics and the culture of the Norse still exists. It's a living society. So, some of this has been lost, but actually a lot has gone into other things. So you can, if you Google calling in the cat or put it into YouTube, you'll see, but it's almost a yoiking. So basically people would go and call the cattle to them. So it was like a come to me, and then, you watch them do it, and they all kind of put their heads up and they're like, oh, I'm going to trot over now. So, but it's a wordless chant. It's very much like a yoik. Definitely, do
I'm going to go and look it up.
Because for me, it just sounds so much like, you can really feel the energy within it. And I think we know that this is something that's done, and there's no reason to believe that it doesn't go back much further. Plus, when you hear the Sami yoiking, and you hear that sort of, the wordless songs of the Sami, then they had access to that. It was just literally at the top of their territory. So why would they not use that?
Yeah. And again, it makes so much sense. I'm thinking about landscapes. I think about, bizarrely, what's coming to me is yodeling. That the voice echoes backwards and forwards through like valleys and mountains in a way that a drum would be lost. Its rhythm would be lost because the echo wouldn't resound. It would just become blurred. And then the relationship that we have with herd animals, with deer and with cattle, and the howl of wolves. All of these things. Why would we use drumming when we had access to that, and potentially to sort of animal communication, like you say, as well? Oh, I'm going to go and look that up. That's going to be homework for all of us. Thank you very much. So I've mentioned this already, because I mentioned that I love your books. I really love both of your books. And one of the things that I love about them is that there's a simplicity to, this is what you're going to do, this is how you're going to do it, you explain it, but there's also a depth. It's an impressive skill to have both at the same time, because it's not overly wordy, maybe similarly to the our ancestors, to the northern ancestors, who knew how to be pithy, how to use like the poetic to convey a meaning. And how did those come about? How did you just decide, right, I'm going to write a book about the runes, Odin's going to, he's told me to do this? How did that happen?
So when I first, this sounds terribly grandiose and like the weirdest kind of magical thinking, but when I first found out that I wanted to learn about Seidr, but that there wasn't any information on it, I was like, oh wow, somebody should write a book on this. And then I went, well, I'm going to write a book on it. And I was like 20, I lived in a shared house. I was a really terrible student. It's not like I was really good at research even. So I have no idea how I thought this was ever going to come around. But it was, it's like part of me almost, time isn't linear, time is sort of, it's like the time is the web of weird. It's all connected and all. So part of me, I think, knew that I was meant to write a book. So I had to try and then work out a way to do it. So I did lots of practical work, as you know, being part of lots of it. We had rites coming out of Treadwells, we had, meetings in our house. We just kept going. Every time anyone was willing to do any Seath work with me, I did it. And I tried to do as much research as possible. Many hours in the British Library, sometimes falling asleep because I'd done a whole day's work and then gone to the British Library afterwards and was exhausted. So, I was very, very determined that I wanted to write a book on Seath, and it was something I really wanted to do. And it's difficult to kind of have that. There was so many books around at the time where there just was, the historical detail was just not quite there. You read it and you thought, well, that's not true. And that, there just wasn't any. And I wanted people to be able to go and research and understand themselves. But I also wanted to write the book that I wanted to read. I wanted basically this is how you do it, but you don't have to do it exactly this way, but these are ways in which you can do it. So, it took, 10 years to actually fully write it. And even then I was like, oh, well, I could do more. But Sarita was like, just please put it out. It has
very wise.
And in the meantime, I had run a runes course. So I did a runes course for Treadwells, and I was really diligent in this rune course, in this sort of wanting to teach people. So my course notes, every time I did a session, got longer and longer and longer, and I was just printing out pages and pages and pages of information. And one of the students on the course basically picked it up and went, this is not course notes, this is a book. And then somebody else was like, oh, why haven't you written a book? And I looked at all this, like the course notes, and said to Sarita, I was like, okay, so is this a book? And she was like, yes. You still need to do this and this, and then we can publish it. So Odin's Gateways basically wrote itself. Within 4 weeks of writing a course, which is
it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest that you write a book that way. I think if I'd spent longer on it, it would have more structure, and it would benefit from more time spent on it. Obviously all the information I'd researched for years, but I think it could be structured a lot better. And I think it is noticeably 4 weeks of writing rather than 5 years of writing.
But you can still feel within it the desire to teach. Mm-hmm. I think that comes through really, really strongly, which not all books that's the case, is it? Sometimes it's a sort of compendium of bits that you go, oh, that's interesting, and you have to go back to a book and go, I remember that ritual from in this book, and you go off and you look at that. Or my bugbear, the reason I launched Awakening rather than doing a book was because I wanted to know where all of the correspondences for all of the runes came from, because I was like, where is this crystal come from? And then it talks about essential oils, and then there's incense, and then there's the tarot cards, and what's happening here. And I started to do this compendium to try and trace back where all of them came from. And it got to about 500 pages, and I was like, this is like a massive encyclopedia. It's not really, it's not compelling. It's not compelling reading. It was great for me, but it was like loads of index cards. And it was because so many books you can read, you could trace back and say, well, this one was written 2 years after that one, and so they've nicked the bits from that book, but that book wasn't referenced either, so they haven't got referencing either. And I love that your book is sort of stripped back in that sense. It's just like, these are the things that we know, and this is what feels right to me, that has worked. It wasn't a which some of them are. some of them are, to be honest, or there isn't that. I don't always get the feeling that people have as many years of practice. So you can still tell that it's 10 years of practice in the book. So I still, I stand by it. See the Gate is Open is, I think, like a masterpiece, and is so valuable and so needed, for people. It gave people permission to go and try something, like when they didn't have somebody to work with, and they were like, I'm here with a group of 5 friends and we're going to try it, and suddenly they've got a structure to do it, and it's wonderful. But Odin's Gateway has its own magic as well. I definitely think so. Well, I've got some comments in the chat box, and let me have a little look. Unfortunately, my phone is not showing them up, so I have to switch backwards and forwards between screens. So Maggie is saying culning, which I'm assuming is the term that we were talking about for the use of the voice.
Yes, culning. That's right. Yes, culning. Yes.
Say it's on Spotify, so we can look on Spotify.
Yeah, culning.
Kathy is saying perhaps the sagas are more like chanting to bring all into harmony with spirit. Yeah, potentially. Like I feel like I don't, maybe just because I don't want to feel as if I'm a sort of mad old woman quite yet. I don't read the sagas out to myself aloud, perhaps as often as I should, but now I want to go and do it to see what it does. And Sally-Ann is saying, Maddie has an amazing hypnotic singing voice. Well, thank you, Sally-Ann. That's very kind of you. So please do keep the comments going. We've got a couple more questions for Katie, but if you do have any questions for her, I'll come back and check the comments box again to see if you have any more questions. So I'm going to ask you my question now, and I'm intrigued by it, but it's a mean question, which is your favorite room? What's your favorite room?
So I don't have a favorite room. Like I don't. I mean, you can't ask me to make a decision on anything. So
that's why you had to ask Seidr if it was a book, yeah.
yeah, that. I mean, yeah, I don't. I mean, they all have a different purpose, they all have a different need. So, some I would use more than others, but you can't choose between them because they all do something different and you might need it. So if I say I want Bacana to be lovely and healing and soothing, and then I've got a disaster and I need to be yelling Hagalaz at people, I haven't got it. So
you reminded me that it was Marco said in Middle Earth readings this morning, he said I've been Hagalazed. And I was like, everyone who has ever drawn Hagalaz like multiple times knows exactly what Marco means. I have been Hagalaz. It's a difficult time, but it was formative.
Yes, it was useful, but it was a little bit
yes.
Yeah.
Great mother standing in all of her power coming forward with Hagalaz. It's a bit like asking which is your favorite child, isn't it? I think really.
Yeah. And I think we can't really choose between, we definitely can't choose between children, and we can't choose between runes.
I'm going to choose Kinaz for you as an honoring of you, because I feel that creatrix energy of that desire to shape something practical with your hands, to actually bring something true that's meaningful and that people can use. But there's also that torch of enlightenment and the research that you did and the practice that you did. It feels very Kinaz-y to me. So when you were speaking, I was like, yeah, that's the room that I'm going to associate with Katie and with this interview.
That divine spark.
I think
the thing with Seath and Odin's Gateways is that basically books, you had to, when you wrote a book, you had to write it that it was publishable. And at that time, you either had an experiential book, which you weren't allowed to put any references in, or you had an academic book, which was really hard to read. So I think this is the real beauty of being able to either publish your own books or have a publisher like Avalonia, who is willing to allow you to merge the two together, because it's something that even now, you know, people don't want to, they don't want to publish a book that's really heavily researched, and or they don't want to publish an academic book where the academic has gone native and is talking about things like gods and spirits. And so it really, you know, and look at all books sort of up to around kind of 2005-ish, and they really were, you had to be academic or you had to be experiential. And the rise of self-publishing means that we've all thrown that out the window now. You know, look at any book that's published in the last 10 years. Good books that sell well are the ones that have the mixture of both. But when I wrote those books, it wasn't the done thing. You weren't supposed to do that.
Yes, no, you're right, aren't you? It's almost like, oh, I could talk about this for hours, so I'm going to try and keep it brief. But it's certainly in my field, having worked in universities for 25 years and done this work for 25 years and kept the two separate, it was because you would lose credibility by being too much in one, and you would lose credibility by being too much in the other. So it was very difficult to navigate that. And it is. So we're in such a wonderful place now where that's starting to be acknowledged, and where in the academic world, people are starting to realize that actually there is value to having that experiential knowledge at the same time as the academic, and that no one is really divorced. No, I am just the observer. And that's a weird privileged position in its own right. It's like the sort of ethnographer or the anthropologist viewing the native peoples. And I think it's in is it in Simon Michael Harner's work? I'm not sure if it's in Michael, but it is in some of the books, the early books about shamanic practice. And there's a story about the researcher who goes in and he's sitting around the table with a family, and the father is inviting in the spirits into the room, and the researcher's writing, and the strange family was speaking to these spirits as if they were actually there, you know, and he obviously considers this to be entirely insane, you know, madness, what's happening here. And then at some point the father turns around to him, and he's obviously clocks that the researcher is struggling with this, and he goes, you do know that we know that they're not here in the same way as you do. And the researcher's like, he does understand. And it was like, you know, he was sort of, I'm just sitting on the outside. But because he was on the outside, he wasn't able to, he didn't have the language or the way of talking about or understanding that it's possible for somebody to be interacting with spirit and be sitting down to dinner at the same time and know that the two things are slightly different.
Yeah, like saying grace, you know, we say grace, but we may not be in exactly, you know, we don't necessarily believe that we are actively blessing the food. It's
no, very. Oh, we could get into a whole discussion about transubstantiation now, Katie. I'm going to pull back. I'm pulling myself. but yeah, this idea that actually there is value in being immersed in and a participant in the field of study. It's now becoming actually, why would you do it when you know nothing about this whatsoever, and you've just come in and you think that you can understand what's going on here? I'm just going to talk myself down from a whole new area of discussion and check what people have put in the comments. So let's see. So is it Jens Borges? I'm really sorry, I probably pronounced your name really badly wrong, or Jens. The book of Katie is about Nordic witchcraft. I think the question is maybe what the title is. Would you like to repeat the title of both of your books, Katie?
So it's Seidr, The Gate is Open, is the one about Seidr and witchcraft, and Odin's Gateways is the one about the runes.
Great, excellent, thank you. And both very recommended, both by Avalonia Publishing. Marcus says, one bad mother, but the learning effect was amazing. Yes, I was talking about the Hagelad's rune there. Maggie is she teaches the lessons because she loves you, but it's a hard one.
Yes.
Indeed. And Sally Ann is saying, I've trained as a hypnotherapist, but I've always felt there's something missing. I'd love to know of how you weave in your training and your wisdom, which is great, because I was going to ask about that as our sort of our final place of exploration, is to look at the work that you're doing now, and how might that feel to somebody who is maybe has a bit of magical awareness, or they know what's going on a little bit more. How are those blending for you in that practice?
Yeah, so I mean, I've also been like researching quite a lot of sort of, I guess, American psychotherapy techniques, and a lot of them are very like, there's a lot of spirituality in them. There's a lot of, expecting certain things. So if you look at things like internal family systems, then there is a lot of, it does seem almost shamanic in many ways. It builds on some of the work that Jung did, but of course lots of witchcraft builds on the work that Jung did. So looking at both sides of that. But really, when you're working with, so for me, when I'm working with hypnotherapy, I'm working with the subconscious. So I'm working with the part of the brain that we don't access every day. And that's exactly what you're doing when you're working with ritual. So when we put a ritual together, particularly when we put a spell together, what we're doing is we're using actions to then access the subconscious. So what we're doing really is we're doing something in a spell which represents what's happening in our mind. So whether we want to, leave that job and we want to cut the cord, we're doing, so sometimes in spellcraft, you're doing that physical action of scissors, thread, you're doing the knot work, you're doing, so all of this stuff, you're blowing out a candle, you're doing something which represents that. So with hypnotherapy, what I do is I use the metaphors that I would use with witchcraft. So I would, take somebody into a journey and have them literally see, see the well and put their fears into the well. I would see them, see their subconscious, see their emotions as water, and step into those emotions to be able to feel them safely. And so all of the metaphors and all of the things that you have in spellcraft, so if you're going to put a spell together, all of these things that you would do, you do in people's brains basically instead. So it's like, in a way, by merging the two together, what you're doing is you're making witchcraft more effective, because what we want to do with witchcraft is we want to change our beliefs. A lot of times we're not changing other people, we're changing the way we interact with the world. So in witchcraft, what you're doing is you're putting yourself into an altered state where you're able to access your subconscious and just tweak it to go a very slightly different way. You're changing your belief systems, you're doing something which convinces your brain that you are effecting change. And the brain is massively just plastic, as long as you do it in the right way, you can change your beliefs so quickly. I've worked with people who have, come to me and they've said, my problem is this. And then a week later, and you've got all the notes, you've got literally everything that you've written down. They're like, yeah, so I never had a problem with this. My problem is this. And you're like, I literally treated you for that last week. And now you're telling me that that's not you, because the brain can change so fast. We don't even remember that there was anything wrong. So, when you bring in witchcraft, it just really kind of, spellcraft is so old, it didn't start with Gerrard Gardner and everything else. A lot of what he used was there for, literally, we've got folk tales, we've got fairy stories, we've got all this information. And that's actually what I've been doing a lot with my witchcraft. So the last 5 years, I looked at what I did with Seidr, and I looked at the way we absolutely scoured every reference of Seidr in the sagas to then build something together. And I looked at actually in our language, in our fairy stories, in our myths. All of this information is here. We all know about what this witch did and this witch did and that witch did, but it's not just about witches. It's about this person did this little charm and this has this in it, and you know, all of the birth magic stuff, you know, all the things we do to protect unborn children and to make sure women are safe when they give birth, all the magic we give to soldiers when they go off to war. You know, this stuff is all available. You just have to look for it, and then you go, okay, but how can I tweak this? How can I make this work? So this is, you know, generations and generations of folklore. Even when you look at, you know, you read Thomas Hardy, you read Far from the Madding Crowd, and she's doing divination with a Bible. So, you know, she's basically, that's exactly what she's doing. So all of these books, there are hints everywhere. Everywhere in our history there is magic. We just need to pull it out and see if we can find a way to make it work for us.
And some of those things are deeply instinctive as well, aren't they? So many people I talk to, and we do a practice, and then they go, oh, I've been doing that for years. I thought I invented it. You know, because as you said, some things are passed down as well, but some things it's just like this, like not magics. And I can't remember what the exact example was that people did, but you know, people will talk about, oh, I had this experience and then I did this. And, oh, you know, I did the same. Does feel like it's, you know, whether it's carried in the collective consciousness, like in the Jungian sense, or there's just something about the like humanimal, you know, that does that we just are ritual creatures, that we know how to shape. Exactly like you were saying, there's an instinctive, or how would I do that? How would I have a deep impact on my own subconscious mind that would allow me to move through this thing that's limiting me or holding me back? That, you know, we know how to do that. So I remember when I think I must have been about 20 when I was like a little witchlet. And you have this question, is it real? Is it real? I don't know. Is it real? I don't know what's happening. You know, I don't know what's going on. And even with all the evidence coming in, it's still like, well, is it? You know, because society says no, it's not. And I just decided, I said to myself, Maggie, even if it's not real, I would rather live my life as if it was, because it's really effective. So just stop worrying about it. And you know, it's been much easier ever since with that. But you know, I love the idea that, you know, I hope for us in future generations that we can bring the wisdoms of the present and of the Enlightenment age, and the older wisdoms that we sort of are whispering at us, like sort of cobwebs waiting to come back, that we can bring those together. You know, I mean, I don't know whether you do like space holding for your clients or not. Like, I think that's something that I've always naturally done. So even when I worked in, you know, community work, and when I worked as a employment coach, you naturally, it's something that's so instinctive. You naturally hold space for them. You naturally sort of build that level of rapport so that you're able to get them to really access their own subconscious. And it's only when you then learn psychology and hypnotherapy that you go, oh, I've done this the whole time. Yeah. And again, I think that's true. And I do think there are some people who feel like, you know, people go to them and they feel like, you're a natural healer. I feel safe. I feel safe with you. And often it is because they are generating this protective energy all around them, and they don't even know that they're doing it. And that idea of bringing that more into conscious awareness, that there are techniques that you can either, some people use them instinctively, but that they can be learned, is so important, and I think would make life so much easier for so many of us who do engage with the world in that way. Now, I remember the first time I ever went to a professional, you know, it was a big training. There was about 100 people in the room, and I was sitting in this training, and suddenly I felt that little like different like buzz of energy that I was used to feeling when I went to like Conway Hall, or, you know, to Treadwell's or something like that. And I was like, what is this? What's happening here? They they have built space. I can feel it. I know that they've done it, and they delivered this. It was the most transformative, fabulous training that I had ever done. I think up until that point, I was just like, oh. And I went to the marketers. I was like, "What were you doing? You were holding space, weren't you?" And they were like, "Yes, we were." And I was like, "Wow, that is a world that I want, where like people in business suits with, you know, proper, all the chairs, and they had X's where you needed to stand, and there was slides and PowerPoint present and all sorts of things, were also just like, well, of course we would build a bubble of protection around the participants, and we would set the intention at the beginning of each hour as to what the transformation was that we wanted to occur, and everyone, all of our trainers would come together and hold that intention before everyone came in the room. Why would you not?" I was like, that is the world that I want.
And in many ways, I think it's actually easier to hold space on a Zoom call and on an online group than it is to hold space in real life. And I think this is something that we haven't really, until the pandemic, we just didn't explore. And I mean, I've been used to, when I'm doing hypnotherapy, I've been used to holding space for clients online in that instant. But actually, when I taught the Seidr course in September, I realized that actually you can hold space, you can create much better rapport actually from a Zoom call than you can in real life, because it takes more effort, there's more work in real life. And actually, when you're on Zoom, even when people have got their cameras switched off, even when you're doing other things, you're actually, a lot more of your consciousness is put into being part of that experience than in real life. Because in real life, you're sort of looking out the window, you're worried about what the other person next to you is doing, you've got all that, the unsafe smells, you've got all the unsafe sensations, you don't know where the toilet is, you don't know if you're going to be able to have a drink when you need it. Whereas in your own space, in your own room, as long as you feel safe in your own home, actually you can enter into feeling safe and feeling connected far, far easier than you ever can when you've done an hour-long trip across the tube, the room's a bit funny, you're too close to people, it takes much, much longer to build up that feeling of safety in a group in real life than it does on the internet. So an hour-long lesson online, you can build that safe connection and hold that space much easier than in real life, when you may need that first 15 minutes to make people feel safe.
You are so right. You're so right. And for the person holding the space, that actually it's all familiar, it's all around me. It's like the drumming, isn't it? We don't have the distractions going on. We can get straight into the transformative voice work before the drum comes in. Oh, that is brilliant. Let me check and see if we have any further things that people want to share. Maggie's just said, I've just bought See the Go With Open as an audiobook. I didn't even know it was available as an audiobook. Did you read it?
No.
Somebody else did it. An audiobook.
So every now and again, Sarita says, do you want to do this? And like various like translations of books and I just go, yeah. And then she sends me some money and I go, thank you. So I am aware that it's an audiobook, but I haven't actually listened to it or really engaged with it.
You'll have to let us know then if Katie would be proud of the audiobook. Sally Ann says, thank you, really glad that's given you some food for thought. And Kathy has said, yes, great idea, which is wonderful. The need to set the space for any work one does, especially when working with children in soul collage. Any advice on this? Okay, so this is for Kathy. So in her own practice, I think bouncing off what we were saying about setting space, she was just asking, is there anything specific that could be done around work with children? And Kathy does soul collage, so they're using art as a way in as well. I'm just wondering, is there any advice that you would have on working with children to create those types of safe spaces?
Well, I don't work with children, so I'm literally just remembering things that I've learned in other trainings. But this is for adults as well, but more important for children, is that if you're working with people who have experienced trauma or who don't feel safe in their body, then bringing them out from that kind of shutdown mode into a place of connection can be difficult, and you sometimes have to go through kind of the anxiety and the anger and the wakening up stage. So that playfulness is, I would assume, would be more important with children. So creating a space where if you work with people so the conscious brain is every day. That's the part where we're thinking everything that is, and we can't access sort of that magical element of ourselves. So one way to get in touch with the subconscious is by stories, it's by play, and children are much better at that than us. So being able to get them to play make believe and things would be I think that would be useful. But as I say, I don't work with children. I don't really even work with teenagers. It's all sort of, I work with inner children. So I would work with a client, and then I would take them to a place where they were able to communicate with their child's self, or with themselves at a point in time where maybe trauma occurred. So I would work with an adult who was, demonstrating a part of themselves that is still a child, but I don't work with actual children.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And it is a specialist field. I've got two young children at the moment, and I've been doing a little bit of magical work with both of them. And I think for me, it's about offering an invitation, but letting them step through.
Yeah.
Rather than ever imposing anything, and recognizing, we were talking about instinctive ways of working. I've talked about this in other groups before, that I used to have two like imaginary friends, let's say. Very, I knew them and all of those things, and obviously they disappeared. I can't remember how old I was when they disappeared. And then when I was an adult, I suddenly realized that I basically had the adult version of the same two had come as my shamanic guides. And there is no way that I would have ever associated my childhood cartoon-like characters with what came later, until I suddenly went, oh, they're the same. And it was, and it was so I think children have that natural capacity for using their imaginations in a way that gets shut down when we're adults, which can be really helpful. So I often work with an invitation with my children, and I do a lot of clearing work as well in their spaces. I know in school, my son, he was telling me today, he was like, we have I was in the angry tent today. I was like, the angry tent? What is the angry tent? And so the angry tent is a tent that they put in their classrooms, that if you're feeling angry, you can go inside and you can become calm in the tent. And I was like, well, that's great. And then I was going, I wonder if they're clearing the anger out of that tent. No, they're not. That would be the bit that I would hand in. I would be a bit like, what does this space need after these children have been doing all this amazing work of going, I'm now going into the angry tent, and I'm going to have a discussion with the worry monster. They've got this worry monster. They're doing some powerful work for themselves. So it might just be more about doing a bit of a cleanup operation afterwards. But yeah, fascinating what they're doing. Jen says, I agree so much. I love this observation. I've experienced it as well. Oh, I think I've missed that one when it was. Let's just assume that it was a really great observation, and that yes, that Katie was fully on the mark with that. And Elaine says, thank you very much. So we have come to, I have no more questions in the group. So I'd like to say thank you so much to everybody who has joined us live. I know that lots of people said, oh, I can't make it for that time, so they're going to be joining us for the recording, in which case we hope that you've enjoyed it. And most importantly, thank you so much, Katie, for coming and joining me and sharing so much of your wisdom. If people would like to come and work with you, obviously I've already shared the link to your website. But is there anywhere else that they can look for you? Anything that you say, yes, come. This is what I know your Seidr course is just finished, but is there anything you'd like to share with us?
So there's I tend to do lots of little bits and pieces. So there is a self-development group that I'm just literally starting up now. We had the first one in September, which is merging sort of psychology techniques and psychology theories with magic and paganism. So sort of exploring a different thing every month. And that's called Benu's Table. So that I think is benustable.org. And it needs sort of, I need to do a little bit of work on the website. I think I've got October and November ready to buy tickets for, but not not any forward than that. So I need to do that. And I'm going to be running a transgenerational and ancestral healing course in February. So I'm going to do a practice version sort of at the end of this month with people I already know. So hopefully it will be fully ready to be used with unsuspecting new people. But that will be that. I think I've got tickets for that, I think, on my hypnotherapy website, but it all links back and forth together.
Yes, I remember that Benny's Table is linked to from your
yeah, that's linked through from, so it all works kind of back and forth together. But the transgenerational work is something I've been doing a lot of research into and training on lately, and it's basically it's like the sort of official version of the ancestor healing work that we've done for decades. But so now I'm blending the two basically, and it's looking at healing parts of yourself by going back and seeing what experiences your ancestors had. So it's really, there's so much, and basically research has shown that trauma from earlier generations does have an effect on our safety elements, on how we feel, and it can change the DNA. So for example, if you've lived in, if your ancestors lived through famine, then you will be sort of naturally a bigger body shape than if your ancestors haven't, and you will be healthier, larger. So understanding what your ancestors and what your, the energy that you've gained from your ancestors have given you means that sometimes we can heal that. But a lot of times we go, do you know what? I understand why this is as it is. And just in the same way as you maybe wouldn't want to change, the color of your eyes, or, how tall you are, or how long your legs are, you work with it. And it's the same with sometimes ancestry work. Sometimes ancestors, we can release that trauma and we can release that emotion from them so that we don't carry it on to the next generation. Or sometimes we can go, this is a lovely gift that you've given me, because what the changes that happened in you have given me, a greater awareness. So the things that my ancestors went through means that I have hypervigilance. That means that I am psychic. I can see what people need. I can feel the energy of a place. What a beautiful gift. So that may have been because of the things that my ancestors went through, but I have harnessed it and I can work with it. And when I pass that on to my children, I pass it on as a gift, not as a, this is terrible, I'm always scared. It's so there's so much. I've kind of rambled lots in great passion about transgenerational work, but it really is, it's amazing. And anybody who wants to do ancestor work or has already started with their ancestors, it's a really good step to just take that a little deeper.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's very powerful and fascinating at the same time. So I will share the link to Katie's website. So the message is you can look at Benno's Table on there now, and just keep your eye on that, and there's lots more to come. So thank you, Katie. Yeah, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I'm going to finish our Facebook Live now and say goodbye to everybody else. Take care, everybody. Lovely to see you all, and see you all very soon.
Excellent.